advising and mentoring, they didn't think that they were making some bigger changes there. Probably were going to take a couple of years to get into place. But after that, they thought maybe they would see some medium-level impact. So what this did was enable them to really think about the different things that they were doing, where it was going to make a difference, and when it was going to make a difference. And for those of you with IR backgrounds in the room, this is the kind of thing that, you know, we know drives IR people crazy, because it's about predicting. It's not necessarily accurate. You don't just look at your past performance and draw your line out from there. You think about, well, if we make these changes, where do we think they'll make a difference? The most important thing about this is not necessarily how you end up drawing the chart. It's the conversation and the analysis around thinking through how you would frame something like this that helps you really see where it is you can make a difference and where it is you want to put your emphasis and which things you want to watch. So you get out to, now we're here in 2012, this they did a while back, and maybe you're not hitting the mark. You're not at 44%. You're still at 43%. So you can then look at these things and say, well, you know, what happened? Those changes we put in the advising and mentoring support services, we got a new director and it changed, and then maybe they've gotten off track. Maybe they're not focused on that anymore. Or the, what's going on in terms of faculty development. We really need to revisit that and make sure we're on track there, and so on. And just as a way of looking at what you're doing, taking a step back and looking at it from an overall perspective. And then finally, we also see very much the value of best practices, and we really encourage our network folks to be doing just what you've done for the last 2 days, to really get the people in the room that know about strategies that work. And then we think about, well, so then how do you take those and build the delivery tools around them to move the agenda forward? And here you can see George Koo's high impact practices. Another group of things I draw your attention to are the leading indicators that were developed by the Access to Success Network that really have tried to identify the student behaviors that are going to predict success. So we all know that good predictors of success are, you know, high school GPA, ACT score, family income level. You can't change those once you have a student on your campus, but you can change their behavior once they get there. And our data show that these kinds of things in relationship to course participation and enrollment patterns and course performance really do predict retention and ultimately graduation. So if you do this kind of analysis on your own data and identify which of these things make sense in your own campus setting, you can begin to target interventions to these kinds of strategies. So I think I'm going to leave it at this point. I'm hoping maybe at the end we'll have some time for conversation and questions, and I'd be happy to share more at that point. But before we do that, we want to hear some examples of delivery issues from your network, your own network, and now I'm going to introduce CJ.
Thanks, Rebecca. We've had a delivery plan at Eastern since September. This is our front cover. I'd like to talk briefly about delivery planning and developing the plan, and then show you some samples. Delivery planning really is tactical rather than strategic. It takes the broader goals of our strategic agenda and fills in the details of how we intend to accomplish the goals. It's implementation focused. As Michael Barber says, implementation is 90% of everything. It includes targets, trajectories, milestones, frequent checks along the way. It lays out in great detail how and when each target will be achieved. It breaks out each element to manage the details as part of the delivery chain, and which include current and potential initiatives as well as the indicators and metrics you saw some examples of before. It takes accountability to a new level. Not just what can we put you down for, but how and when are you going to achieve it. I'm a big fan of the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, and it takes that cycle for continuous quality improvement and hyper-accelerates the Check, Act subcycle. Frequent assessment, frequent course correction. As Rebecca mentioned, a very important aspect of delivery planning is anticipating potential or likely obstacles to achieving each target and developing mitigating strategies for each one. In other words, what could possibly go wrong, and what will we do now to fix it before it becomes a problem? And especially in this step, it's extremely important to involve frontline staff and faculty in all aspects of developing and implementing the plan, but particularly in this aspect. Structure and vetting among campus stakeholders helps to minimize or avoid what's called unintended consequences. That's a really big benefit of this delivery planning, is avoiding unintended consequences. For example, if a policy is implemented to encourage student course taking or behavior in a particular area, will this impact another area or even retention negatively? Having everyone who might be impacted at the table early on as the plan's being developed is critical. Striving for gains, even modest ones, in each element of the delivery chain should improve student recruitment, retention, student success. And this process really does seek to involve and motivate the entire campus to make every effort to achieve these gains. One really critical part of this to understand is it's not one big thing or one big idea. It's turning the dial, or lots of dials, sometimes very slightly, on many different things: policies, initiatives, practices, culture that affect student success. As far as developing the plan, I wrote the first draft of the Eastern Plan. I started by looking at some of the plans from the Cal State campuses. Cal State Chico in particular was a very good one, that were shared with us at previous meetings, along with Eastern's new strategic plan, our running list of student success initiatives. There's some sources for good ideas: SREBs, promoting a culture of student success, obviously the NESE DEEP schools. McKinsey did a study called Winning by Degrees, the strategies of highly productive higher ed institutions, that I found to be extremely valuable. It's just out on the web if you Google McKinsey and Winning by Degrees for best practices for student success. One of the things I found early on, though, is that you shouldn't base your plan too closely on another school's plan. You have to adapt it to your school's culture and truly make it your own. At Eastern, we leverage the concepts of the power of maroon and the essential Eastern as themes that help to inform our plan. For acceptance by faculty, chairs, deans, the campus community, it really has to look and feel like it came from your own school and wasn't adapted closely or cribbed, as it were, from another institution. One of the things that was interesting for us is it became very clear that for broad campus consumption, that we would not call it across campus a delivery plan. As you can see here, it's a roadmap. One of the things that in part is we found when we were doing some research that there was some pushback in the Cal State system on this idea of delivery. The word delivery there, especially among faculty, took on sort of a pejorative meaning. And so we know it's a delivery plan, it looks just like that, but we have not been across campus really referring to it as the delivery plan. There was sort of the stand and deliver idea that I think took hold at Cal State. We called it a roadmap in part because of the use of the milestones and our current marketing branding campaign of "You Can Get There From Here," you can see on the cover. So the roadmap seemed to make more sense for us in terms of broad campus consumption. A suggestion, if you do one of these, is starting with a handful of related targets. We did not do all 15 from the statewide strategic agenda at once. Just one target, however, isn't really compelling enough, so we picked 5. That seemed to be about right for us. Once there's some acceptance of this methodology on campus, then you can add other targets. We found there are some goals in the statewide strategic agenda relating to grad rate gaps, like between prepared and underprepared. We didn't touch those on a first pass. The grad rate gaps the goals related to gaps are really challenging on the delivery planning side because there are so many moving parts to those gaps. There are 3 aspects: the grad rate for prepared, underprepared, and then the gap. There's so many moving parts there that we didn't take that on in our first pass. So we identified increasing the number of bachelor's degrees awarded as our primary goal in our plan. And then we had 4 supporting, or what we called nourishing goals: increasing grad rates, increasing the number of KCTCS transfers, efficiency of credits earned, and increasing online credits. So we vetted the roadmap first with our president and vice presidents, then with the academic deans, then with our implementation team. We have a 45-member cross-functional team to help improve Eastern's performance and student success, and they had a lot of good. It's really, the plan's become a great vehicle for the I team, the implementation team, to generate other new initiatives, and the mix of current to suggested initiatives keeps going to almost entirely current now, as suggested initiatives come online. It's always cliched when you hear people say that a plan is a living document. It really is true in this case. I've updated it every month. It really is a living, growing, breathing document on campus. Our IR office has developed a student success website that provides information on these indicators disaggregated by college department program. Real quick on next steps, I think our couple next steps, drilling down and setting targets by college department program, setting accountability expectations at that level that then work their way up to the institutional level. One of the things that you'll see when we get to just a couple examples is we have a boatload of initiatives. And the question that always begs when you see that is, are they working? Which ones are working? Are they competing with each other? And that's another next step for us is assessing the initiatives to see which are effective and which we might stand down. So this first slide here is the linkage between our university strategic plan and the statewide strategic agenda. We were able to have the strategic agenda inform our university strategic plan, which of course then both inform our delivery plan. But we were very specific and purposeful in making sure that these were linked together. These are then the hierarchy. These are the 5 goals in our roadmap, showing the hierarchy of the number of bachelor's degrees awarded as the primary goal, and then the grad rates, CASE-DCS transfers, efficiency of credits earned, online learning are the supporting or nourishing goals. This is the delivery chain, the color-coded delivery chain for links for the elements in our primary goal. So when you see this, it's almost like the student life cycle. It's like you're handing off from one part to the other, from the outreach pre-recruitment to orientation to teaching, learning, supporting, motivating, and graduating. On the bottom it says our baseline is 2,125 baccalaureate degrees. We want to get to 2,500 degrees. If these milestones aren't hit at that time, if we're not hitting the recruiting orientation, we need to fix it at that point as early as possible to make sure that the chain stays together. Note the green arrow on here because I'm going to show you the next slide. That's the teaching, learning, supporting, motivating. Here's the detail for that green arrow step in the link. So these are the programs and initiatives to accomplish the teaching, learning, supporting, motivating elements in our bachelor's degree goal on the left column. On the right column are the metrics or the indicators to gauge success as to whether we're going to achieve these or not. So as you can see, there's a lot there. You know, what we're trying not to do is let's throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. We've tried to be very purposeful in developing all of these initiatives, making sure that they're working toward this goal, and of course they work toward other goals as well. All of these indicators on the right side are things that we're measuring to see how we're doing against this particular element or piece of the chain. Here's the delivery chain for the transfer goal. So it looks different, again, color-coded based on the sphere that's being done, outreach, recruitment, orientation. But now instead of teach, learn, motivate, support, remember we're trying to increase the number to come to us, engage CASE-TCS transfers to register at EKU. So you'll see a difference in that. Now here, all on one page, for all of these roadmap elements are the initiatives for each of the stages and then the indicators. So maybe not as many, but very focused, very targeted. Again, keep adding. You'll see some current program or initiatives and suggested initiatives on the left side. And then lastly, the decreasing credits earned by graduates. We know that our average baccalaureate degree earner has 144 hours when he or she finishes. That includes developmental and transfer hours. That's a lot of hours. Our goal is to get it to 136, and it's a pretty aggressive timeline to achieve that goal. So these are, now notice there too in the green here, these are the delivery chain pieces for the efficiency of credits, and then these are our initiatives and indicators for each of these. So again, a current initiative, some suggested initiatives. Some of them are also have in common the number of baccalaureate degrees. So that's why there's some relationship in terms of the nourishing and supporting goals. So these are just some examples from our plan. So far it's been working rather well. I think it's had a really positive impact, and to be honest, just being able to vet it with folks and get people's input and avoiding unintended consequences has been really very positive for us.
Good afternoon. I'm well aware that I'm standing between you, questions and answers, and hitting the road, and probably lunch. So I want to first of all thank John and Melissa for the opportunity to be here. You know, we've been working collectively across Kentucky as well as on our individual campuses to address the various aspects of student success. And of course, as we've heard through this conference, that is really the focus of everything we do. Now, I'm going to take a different approach on this. I guess I'm at liberty to do that since I'm a provost, and I think, well, maybe we view the world in different ways, I'm not sure. But this is a little bit about change, and I want to share a story with you about change, because when I share what's going on at Morehead, I don't want you to leave this conference and go, oh man, we can't do this, because this is really an exciting opportunity. All of the things we've been talking about and using the delivery process to get where we need to be. But a long time ago, when my daughter was preschool, just about ready for kindergarten, I went to have lunch with her at the daycare center, and she was in the university daycare center, which was in the bottom level of the building where my office was, and I was on the 3rd floor. And so I went downstairs, and as we were sitting at those little short tables, I looked around and they had moved the PlayStations around in her room. And so, you know, making conversation with the 4-year-old, I said, Hillary, I said, the PlayStations have been moved. I said, how are you doing with this? You know, are you finding everything? And she shrugged her little shoulders and she said, oh, Mommy, life is changing. It's so hard. So I have carried that with me through my career, and I have found that it is, in fact, true at every stage. So let's back up and talk about the fact that as we completed the work on the statewide strategic plan, which we all know is Stronger by Degrees, we immediately began discussion about ways that we could break down this plan into achievable segments that we could measure. And as we did this, and I'm telling you this perspective that some of you, you know, only get the stuff that eventually gets back to campus, there was a real momentum. And I can say that from the perspective of the Chief Academic Officers Group, but also as we began to talk about our own strategic plan at Morehead State, I could sense this momentum. And so, as we began this momentum in moving towards student success, I began to think about where Morehead State was and how we got where we are today so that we're ready to do this. And so I want to focus my discussion on how we look at this from an institutional perspective. And I fully recognize that all of us are in different places. We're going to approach things differently. And we also have different situations on campus. But I hope by sharing what we've done at Morehead State, you'll stand back and maybe think about things a little bit differently. I want to reinforce some of the things that we've heard during the last couple of days. First of all, student success is not an academic affairs initiative. We must have it permeate the campus. It must be the most important initiative that we have. The bottom line is that what we do and why we exist is about the students. And I know sometimes when I go to Faculty Senate, we think that it's about the faculty, or we think it's about whatever else you can put after that line, but it is about the students. When I arrived at Morehead State 5 years ago, we had a number of things to do on our list. And I'm just going to give you a few of those so that you can kind of get a sense of what we've been dealing with. We had the SAC self-study and accreditation visit coming up. We were closing out one strategic plan and developing a new one. We began redesigning general education. We were reviewing all of our academic programs for relevance today and in the future. We were looking at reorganizing academic affairs and addressing the student support service areas to become more focused on student success. And we began to design and implement a continuous improvement program. Now, we have completed almost all of that, and I am still standing, as are my colleagues in the room. And since you attributed me to Eastern, I'm going to claim this privilege, and I'd like the Morehead State folks just to raise your hand, because I could not be standing here without all of them. Thank you. While we were doing this at Morehead State, there were changes at the council. Those included new leadership and some of the following agenda items: Senate Bill 1, focusing on college readiness; HB 160, focusing on transfer; developing of the new strategic plan and the subsequent discussion of implementation; and negotiation of targets for key performance indicators at the institutional level. Needless to say, our agenda has been aggressive and the stakes are high. So what does this mean for me? It means that we need to take a holistic approach to student success rather than just focusing on key initiatives that lay out implementation and assessment plans. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with those, because we've heard the data, we've talked about the issues, we've heard the different stories from the research and the real experiences. We have heard from my colleagues on the panel about the framework for the delivery process, as well as a great example. So those are all important. But my job today is to share our experience so that you can go back to your own campus and assess where you are as an institution and what that means for your student success focus. So what did we do at Morehead State? First of all, as I said, we did the evaluation of programs, but as we did that, we identified metrics that reflected program productivity, quality, and relevance. We have implemented program review in conjunction with the council's revision of program review, which I failed to mention was one of our agenda items. And we are doing that at the department and program level, and we're linking that to budget. We've had assistance from institutional research and data collection, as well as the definition of metrics. We have used different strategies to review all the processes throughout academic affairs that had any kind of impact on students. Those include, but are not limited to, the enrollment process, open house and orientation, advising, policies. We've heard that more than once today about looking at policies, especially those that impact provisional students or those students that find themselves in academic difficulty. Tutoring, transfer in and out, retention, early alert systems. I could go on in terms of what we have looked at within academic affairs. Then we turned, as we were doing that, we turned to the organization. Now, we have a different model than many of you do, but you have to figure out what works for you. We moved enrollment services back into academic affairs. We created a university college, and that college houses general education, developmental education, provisional studies, the oversight of the university studies degree, the academic recovery programs, advising and student assistance, the testing center, first-year programs, Office of Accreditation and Assessment, and within that, the Center for Leadership and Professional Development. We also moved institutional research into academic affairs, and we gave them oversight of the registrar's office. We established a freestanding Center for Regional Engagement with Service Learning as their primary focus, and we combined the adult education and access programs with the regional campus system. As we did that, several initiatives emerged from the organizational restructuring. Those have to do, again, with the program review process, but we call that AP&A fondly, and that stands for Academic Program Needs Assessment. And that is a continuous evolution of program review. It does occur formally on an annual basis, and it is aligned to our data dashboard that then aligns to the key performance indicators and ties all that to budget. Our redesign of general education included the establishment of a first-year seminar, which is focused around a common reading and is looking at both critical thinking and writing skills. And this was mentioned last night in the presentation about these opportunities for everybody to touch base. We established a group called Connect the Dots. And that group, and again, it was about 34 people who ended up being on the initial group, and we have people come and go. We initially looked at enrollment and retention, or persistence, and we have expanded that so that it is a continuous monitoring process. And we look at enrollment at every meeting, we look at retention, and one of the big things that we do in that group is remove barriers for students. In other words, as we go through the process and we see where there are stumbling blocks, we bring the right people to the table and say, how are we going to solve this issue? You know, one of the first ones that we tackled was holds on student records. And I believe that by the time we got to this, we had 64 different kinds of holds. Is that right, Dana? And they ranged from having a library fine or a parking ticket all the way up to not having paid for a semester. But they were all equal in terms of keeping people from registering. And, in fact, when a student looked at their record, they couldn't tell what kind of hold they had. And not only could they not tell what kind of hold they had no idea who to contact. And so one of the first things we did was work with IT to determine what those holds were they necessary? And Dana, how many do we have now? Is it about 30 now? But when a student has a hold, it immediately tells them what it is, who they contact. And we have a policy now where certain holds do not keep students from registering. So those are the kinds of things we work on. As we've had these process reviews, we've had some major accomplishments that I think align with what we've talked about in this meeting. We've had a roadmap to success that guides students from the moment they show interest at Morehead State through graduation. So, and it's an interactive online tool that they can go through and basically maneuver the system. We've established peer coaching and peer tutoring programs, and we've established faculty staff learning communities that focus on student success. So within our institutional framework that we've established, we have ongoing strategies for communication and student assistance, and now we are in a position to begin focusing on student success initiatives. One of the things that I think is so important about these key individuals who meet together is that they are a group that helps me determine whether or not subgroups have to be formed, whether or not other people come to the table. They help us with strategies to remove barriers. These people are critical thinkers, problem solvers, have a broad institutional perspective, and they analyze data effectively. Gee, that kind of sounds like what we've been talking about in terms of liberal education, doesn't it? This team works with other leadership groups on campus to facilitate discussion and understand everything we're trying to do and to look at outcomes along the way. What our goal is not just